Good evening, good evening. I promised I would do an alt stream today, and I've left it till literally the 11th hour because I had spent 3 hours in the gym like a crazy person, but mainly because I was socializing more than working out. But yeah, so hence it's really late. But I did promise I'd do an alt stream today, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to stick with it. We're just on the Bitcoin Ether because I was just checking what happened while I was in the gym, which is not very much. So you can watch yesterday's stream if you want to know what the story is with Bitcoin and Ether. You can also watch. Oh, see this. I've come back and I haven't even loaded the pages yet. Okay, got to wait a couple of seconds. You can watch yesterday's stream also to find out the detail of what I think about on the market cap charts. But I wanted to quickly talk about the others chart on this anyway. I swear one day I might actually have a stream that doesn't like have a teething problem while I'm and I've started it already. At least the alt page is loaded, so even if this one chooses not to, maybe I'll just reload the tab. Even if this one chooses not to, it's not the end of the world. Maybe we'll come back to that anyway. So as you know, if you follow me, that I've wanted for a long time the others chart to fall off a cliff and come down to the next demand before I'm comfortable with longing any alts. And that's what I wanted to illustrate there. In the meantime, I still have loads of alerts coming in, the usual. All my alerts go from TradingView into Telegram, so people are aware. So for example, and then I'll do a bit of analysis there as well. But for example, like I was watching Velvet, which took its sweet time consolidating in this zone, but has now taken off today. We've got a 12-hour supply here. You can see the alert there, 12-hour supply. It's a large zone. There's a 1 hour a little bit inside here, and there's a 2 hour at the top. So obviously it can go much higher in the zone, but the alert comes just before it hits the immediate level. So those alerts go automatically from here into Telegram. So it's up to whoever is trading them and the people in my group to then look at them and decide, you know, whether it's something they want to trade or not. Obviously, you can look back, some I'm right, some I'm wrong. And it's not even a question of right and wrong. It's just looking at zones. It's alerting zones as and when they're hit. And then you're looking for something tradable based on that first alert. And some will be more aggressive than others, like looking for scalps and things like this. So this, you know, when you're looking at the whole chart, this looks like longing the top, and maybe it was, maybe I thought it would break out. At this point, probably I would have thought it would have taken out that high. So it's coming in with an aggressive long and then a slightly less aggressive long, but at that point it then reversed. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get scalps off these. So it's up to people how they trade them, whether they want to trade a higher time frame, come in as soon as the zone is hit with their stop far away, or whether they want to trade a lower time frame and just scalp. And scalp will just run through lots of different scalps. Like you can pick one and stick with it. So yeah, that was just Velvet as an example. I didn't really have any structure for this. I was hoping I'd get some requests, and I didn't get any. We have finally loaded this. I'll go back to the others chart quickly, just for anybody who hasn't seen my previous streams. We've been looking at this for months and months and months and wanting this to come down to here or even here for a very long time. And obviously it's consolidated here for a very long time, has now finally kind of broken down, and I really would like this to now just fall off a cliff into here, see if we get a reaction, or into here, see if we get a reaction below. So for now, it's still holding this support. So it's been a very tough time for quite a while, because we had this bounce on here earlier this year, and it's been slowly consolidating and sideways, and then it came and bounced again when that's sort of June, and now it's bounced again. But as I've said many times, it's bounced like 4 or 5 times on this zone. It's wicked through the zone, in fact. So it's becoming to the point when demand is very, very depleted in that area. And therefore, while it might still hold that area, and we've got this little meme trend line that I've got going on from down here, it might still hold here. Sure, it has been a support many times, but once it becomes a support that many times, then the demand is depleted, and you expect it to go back through. So on the first hit, you're quite happy to take it. In this case, on the second hit, you've got a higher high, so you can look for a higher low. Then we've got a lower high, and then we're forming into some sort of a triangle. So we looked at whether this was going to be a triangle. Did have a really good bounce off that zone again back in October last year, but it's just sort of drifted of death since then. Now we're expecting, or ideally, I want a fall off a cliff. I want alts to just collapse more than they already have, and then price all this chart to come back down into this area. Note that it's an area, or the alerts at the top, it is an area that could hold this area as support, or failing that, based on the fact we have a low high and we didn't have a test of support at this low, tested the breakout, fair enough. There is a fair chance also that it will come back down much lower and retrace more of this 2020 move, which isn't ideal for the alt market. And as I've also said in previous streams, like, I don't know if that's realistic to say that the alt market, which now, I mean, has been 400, 500 billion, currently is 170 or so, 165 billion. To say it's going to come back down to 49 may be completely unrealistic from a fundamental perspective. I don't know, like, I've been bearish on this chart for a long time. I was calling this head and shoulders a long time ago. Yeah, it's hard to judge, because that means obviously a lot of the money has flown out of the market. The reason this didn't break out on this, and we didn't have alt season on this bull run, is mainly because the money was, there was no additional money. Obviously you can see it didn't break the high, but the money was completely spread. Like, I think back here, I did see somebody else's analysis on this. I think back here we had something like, I don't know, 70 coins or 700 coins, as a small number. And then now around these times, we've got thousands, and we've got Pump Fun and all these other kind of shitcoin environments. So the money's just spread everywhere. So when we talk about rotation from Bitcoin into alts, that's all fair and well. And we do get that rotation when we get these runs. But the problem is that it's not rotating. It's rotating then amongst alts. There isn't enough money spread across all alts to then push this chart into a breakout, which is a pity for the alt market. Yeah, so anyway, ideally, I want that to come back down there. And as I was pointing out yesterday, in the majors, like most of the majors, these are the old majors, and I had the change to the new majors. But the old majors, still, I could see them lower. And it's, you know, it's hard when things have fallen this much, and you start thinking, well, surely there must be some sort of retracement, but are there in areas that I would look for long? So obviously BCH has hit a zone that I was interested in longs, and it's still messing around inside the zone, but it's got better zones below. Ripple's just floating in the middle of nowhere. Lost my, I always lose my, there we go. Ripple, down the chart so you can see, so Ripple, yes, might find support here. It's in a zone. It's got the wick here. Maybe it'll find support at the bottom of that wick. But preferably, I would like this lower in annual demand. Litecoin, I haven't really looked for longs for a very long time on, because it's in a 2-monthly demand. But similar to the others chart, it's hit this zone multiple times. And I've now actually deleted it, I think, because it had hit so many times, or maybe it's just come significantly deeper through it. Sure, it shouldn't actually be deleted. Oh, it has, no, because it's broken this low. It's now taken out that 2-month zone there. Arguably, there's a 2-month here, but yeah, I guess that's why I've taken it out, because it just doesn't. So arguably, this is a monthly zone here, and it's still probably just about holding that. So I'll keep that in there. But as you can see, it's hit this monthly here a few times. It's tried to hold the 2-monthly just above more times. 4, 5, 6 times, and now really it's just broken back down into that zone. And yes, it's at a point it might just fail here. I did throw an alert on the 3-day demand here just in case it bounces at that point. But really I'm looking for this to be a retest of the annual demand, or possibly all the way down here. And let's hope not, because of the comparison I made with the Ether chart. That doesn't give Ether necessarily a good future if it follows the same fractal. Anyway, TRX is the last one on this layout. So again, it's on 4-day demand. It could still hold here. I did have an aggressive entry looking for a long on this area. Let me just go to the 4-day. But obviously it's still messing around in there right now. It had the trend line stopped here, which we were concerned about anyway, but I've just wondered if we could get another push on this, if it lines with the rest of the market up to the higher supply zones, even if we then look for shorts higher. But it's still just thinking about things. And then again, failing that, the difficulty on this chart is, yes, we might get a higher low in here, but we've taken out that high. So really we would look to potentially take out that low. And there's a lot of untested zones below. Yeah, so that's the old majors. Then moving on to the new majors, and I talked about all these yesterday, so you can go back and look at those charts in detail if you want. I talked more in detail about them. But just again, doggy over here on the right, we're looking at 6-month demand, and it's wicked just above that, and that would be probably one of the more aggressive ones. Link again could hold this zone. It's trying, but and all of these could hold double bottoms or close to double bottoms. But again, the preference would be to go lower on Link down to the 6 or even the 4. I was talking about this yesterday. This could go to 4, all the way down there. And it's hard to say at this point, that if prices do fall off a cliff, per the others chart, like what would that for others to bounce or to hit where I want it to hit? I'm not sure. I mean, we'll probably get a mixture of alts. Some alts are going to collapse and fall off a cliff, and others will hold better. So obviously that's normal. So we just need to see what the confluence is, and when things are all in zones together, that's generally how I treat these things. So Link's still holding up here, but preferably lower. BNB again, preferably lower. It's got a yearly demand retest and a couple of wicks there that could get taken out. Did have a line in there before, which disappeared. So I've got an alert a little bit lower on BNB, but again, BNB's in a giant 6-month zone, so maybe this is just going to hold and front run me. Now, all of these that I talked about yesterday, or not all of them, but some of them, have this structure where we've got this sort of sideways move. In the case of BNB, it took out the high first, but then a lot of them are now taking out the low, and maybe we're going to get that sort of accumulation, manipulation, distribution type thing. But until we see some movement up into this area, and some breaking of supply and flipping that supply to demand, etc., then I can't be confident that that's going to happen. And basically you're guessing. So anybody who says that from my perspective at this point is guessing, because prices are still low. If you want to trade thinking that might happen, that's up to you. You could take trades, we are in zones. If you see an 8-hour, 12-hour, 4-hour stretch change of structure, then there's no reason you can't take a long and just see if it runs through everything. But for me, that's basically guessing and bottom blasting. You haven't had any break of structure to make these confident in longs. And similarly, ADA. So we've talked about this alert before that I had on weekly, 3-weekly demand in here, but also commented that we have 2-month demand, 6-month demand, various things untested below. So still very early days on all of these. And then finally, the second set of new majors, with now the addition of, so we removed DOT and Atom and added Hype and Zcash. And at some stage I may remove NEAR. I've kept it for the moment because it's got some interesting structure going on and some nice tradable structure. But if we're talking majors based on market cap, I've got XMR kind of added to the list as a potential to replace NEAR once it becomes less interesting. And I see we've got a bit of a bounce on Sol from there. Actually, I was considering an alert on this 2-day demand in here on Sol, but I think I might have talked about that yesterday. I can't remember. But then I ended up with looking for the lower low because everything else was looking so bad. But actually, that's not too bad. We're going to load up here for weekly supply, and there's a little trend line stops there, so it could try and run and stop hunt some of this. And again, as I just talked about, that same potential structure as BNB, so accumulation, manipulation, and distribution could run it up through everything. And we might find that's going to happen on 1 or 2 of these, maybe not all. Anyway, so NEAR, I put in a more aggressive short alert if it comes back and tests it, and again has got some space before it gets to even the more aggressive demand, let alone the one I've got alerted below that. Hype has swing failed high, still in through 3-day and 2-weekly demand here, so it was one I didn't really want to trade at the moment. And the risk if this does come down, if it does break down from here, that it could just again run through a lot of trend line stops below, but does have a lot of demand in the middle. And finally, Zcash, again, not dissimilar to Hype, except it hasn't made a higher high, it's made a lower high here, held some demand on a retest there, and then gave a short entry and is now just kind of thinking about it. So are these going to have a second run, having had their correction? Arguably, these are A, B, C on that wick, so it could now consolidate for moving out of the range. Anyway, so yeah, as you can see, so from the majors, that's why I was saying slightly skeptical yesterday as to whether Bitcoin had bottomed, because the majors aren't really where I want them to be, and then similarly the others chart I still want to fall off a cliff. So in the context of that, the alts have been having really, I've been mainly promoting that it's just sorry, I got distracted by something then. I've been mainly promoting that it's scalps. Like it's certainly not been a long market. If anything, it's still a short market. It's still much more preferable to find the ones that are pumped quickly and then short them back down again. And there's been quite a lot of example of those. And the ones I've got here, in fact, aren't ideal. So these are either the more recent alerts. So what happens when an alert hits is I'll add it to this layout. And then if it plays out, then if I have time, I'll try and get the retest entries. But if it plays out quite quickly, normally I take it straight off the layout. So the layout tends to consist of the ones that are either slower and or that are ultimately might fail, or it consists of, or it includes things like, so Velvet we've got up the top here, and Beat, things that I was just watching for potential for a bigger move. So obviously Beat and Velvet have moved up a lot, Beat has come down a lot, but in many of these cases they eventually just die completely, so they're worth watching for the short re-entries. Now both, like Beat came down too heavily, it didn't give the short re-entry up here. I think Velvet might have been the same, yes. So Velvet also just got thrown off a cliff, so there were ones that I was watching, but I was testing that breakout, and so the breakout retest area. So they're ones I was just watching, but I'm watching now, are we going to get the short entries for bigger moves down, or is this going to give continuation? So I'll keep these on the layout, things like this, to try and get the entries later. We had a similar situation with Allo and US, and these have been incredibly painful, and I hope nobody's been trading them. But yeah, again, big pump on there on Allo, but it has taken, so when did we come up? 6th of June, so we're now the 26th of June, so 20 days we've had of sideways in here. And I had a couple of short entries, and it's just like consolidated, and really just doesn't seem to want to die. And then I added in a trend line break. Delete that alert now, actually, alert. So it goes at the black cross, it's on the 8-hour chart, I think. So when you get an 8-hour close below, that's what I tend to look for, and 8 is better than 4, but even sometimes 12. Then I look for a retest entry. So we had a retest entry on 12-hour supply in here that went earlier, and obviously now it's thinking about potentially coming back down again. And then we'll see if we get a bigger drop on that. That's Allo, and US is not dissimilar. Again, pumped 1st, 2nd of June, and has just been ticking up since then. And this is, yeah, not really in, it's kind of got messy supply up here, so it might want to have another push. But again, I put the same, or similar to Allo, alert on the 8-hour on the trend line, so I know when this is going to break. So really, I don't have to have it on the layout particularly, but those I only just put the trend lines more recently just to see what's going to happen with them. Then on top of that, you've got some crazy stuff like BDX, we come to that, and Idle and M, and some real crazy stuff. And then we've got a few things that have hit major demands, but again, could take a long time to actually do something if they want to. So for example, S here. S that went off there, I'm not sure. S here has hit monthly inside 3 monthly demand. There is a 6 month below, but again, something to watch to see if we get a bounce on this. S is Phantom, is it? Is this what was Phantom? Feel like it might be. so many alerts up here. So this is just one of the ones that hasn't tested. So one of the things I commented on before is just be aware that if there are many zones that haven't been tested above, that when they do run, they can run really hard because they want to go up and test all the untested zones above. And that tends to be a bit frustrating because it makes it quite hard to get in. And I don't love those situations because I like things to come back. So for example, something like this, I would be looking at that going, I want this to come back down here for my entry, and obviously it doesn't. So there'll be something in here in the same way you can see there's a weekly in here. This is a weekly chart, so it's a little bit different, but so that would have given a weekly entry there, and maybe there was a 3-day or something that could be traded there. But it becomes significantly harder when you go down all the time frames, because if this, like, let's say, let's go and look at what we had here. Yeah, so there is a 3-day, maybe it was a 5-day or something like that there, but there's a 3-day there. But once you've got a zone there and you've got a zone here, it's then you start thinking, well, is it going to test here or is it going to come all the way back to there? So hence why I say the alerts are simply there for you to judge when they go off what things are looking like. Like in this scenario, we've also had a massive downtrend, and it's just, and I think I did talk about this here, that I was bearish at the top. But then, you know, you can look for a scalp long here, and that just didn't do much. And then in this case, we look for longs in the hope we're going to get shorts. And as you saw, I just deleted a few of the alerts. If it doesn't come back to test the areas you want, then it doesn't come back. So in this case, this is just one of them that's just crashed off a cliff, and each of the bounces is just given very little. So yeah, but something you can keep an eye on now because it's hit this monthly zone, but obviously no sign of doing anything particularly exciting yet. Theta's another one, so this hit annual demand. Other thousands of alerts at the top there that haven't. I remember a very sad state of affairs of somebody who I know well who was, I don't know if it was here now, I think it was 2021, was telling me that a friend of his had bought a lot up here, and I was just sort of saying, don't really think you should be doing that. It's just too much of a risk in crypto. You just, top blasting is very easy to do. And then, as you can see in this scenario, that he would have held this drawdown and then to get a retest, and whether he exited here in a loss, I'm not sure. But now we're back down. It was 11 and now it's 0.11. So a fairly significant drop there. Anyway, this has now come down into annual demand. What you'll notice, sorry, I would point out some of these charts I have already updated for the monthly and 2 monthly closes. 3 month and 6 months as well, but the 3 months and 6 months, if they exist, tend to be higher. So whereas, like, for example, that 1 month supply in there hasn't confirmed yet, because when I do the updates, it's much easier for me to later delete things if they don't confirm, rather than have to go through everything and put them in. It's monthly demand there, I don't know. That should be, oops, going well. So there's a 3 month down there, and that, in fact, yeah, keep an eye on this if it comes into there. So this might be worth watching. It's 6 month from the US dollar chart, and in fact 2 month, I think, according to manual. There's a 2 month in here. So there's a little bit of confluence in there. I might just put another alert in there as a reminder, just in case I forget. Take it off, if I replace it, if a whole bunch of new things come through on the layout, then I might forget. So it's worth just having a second alert in there in case I remove it by mistake. But anyway, yeah, higher time frame, something to watch here. And on this, it's also worth having a look at the BTC pair, which is going to zero. So this is not very helpful, but on some of the charts, if they do have a BTC pair that's doing something interesting, see, this is not. So at the moment, this is looking quite bearish. It's not really supporting, and there's no historic support. But it's worth looking at BTC pairs in case they have some historic support that can be used for confluence. Not very useful, the 3 options on theta there. So let me just go back to put this in the right place. Yeah, so not very helpful in this case looking at the BTC pair, but it can be. So keep an eye on those just in case, particularly for the older coins like this that have been around quite a long time, because they might have a BTC pair that's of interest. Then there's just been a whole mix of stuff that I'm sort of keeping an eye on. Pod I was keeping an eye on for a breakout or breakdown. Knock I was keeping an eye on for breakout or breakdown. Just some of these, nothing's particularly special and no reason I'm specifically looking at these. Where that has stopped. Some charts that look potentially vaguely interesting, or that they might have something going on. So this was having quite a nice consolidation and leaving a lot of trend line stops up there. However, so I talked about this in the group and having that aggressive entry. I think it made a 2-day demand or something in there, or maybe a daily. And it had a few bounces and then came back through it. I said I wasn't sure if that wasn't too aggressive. Oh, because it had the large 2-week, and so it has obviously come down deeper now. But again, something you can keep an eye on here, because at least it has little supply. And that's a point that's worth mentioning as well, that where things have very little supply, these are the ones that were pumping in the last bull run. One sec, this has been delisted. I'm not going to have alerts that go and then they suddenly get delisted immediately. This was not, wasn't it? Yeah, so we get some things like sin. So there's a good example of the accumulation, manipulation, and then distribution, and it's just run up through everything here, and it had major supply here. I think it had like 3-month supply, so a monthly supply. So I had a 3-month in there. That 3-month had already been tested, to be fair. Then I think it had made a month. It flipped that month. Maybe it made it. Actually, I think that alert that I have at the bottom there was if it makes monthly supply, and I think it didn't. It's just run straight back up through it. But obviously, some of these zones in this case have been tested already, so there's more of a reason for this to run through everything. It's now hit annual supply. So definitely keep an eye on this. But on the short side, I threw in an alert for a retest on this 4-hour zone. But it's still holding daily demand, so that's still an aggressive entry there. But yeah, certainly keep an eye on this for your short entries. And it's got some nice trend line stops there. So if this is going to break down from here, it should run a decent way through. And in the case of something like this, I've got an alert here, but I'm not overly confident of any of these anymore. Yeah, when these ones that have just had those very quick pumps, as soon as they have the very quick pumps, as soon as they retrace, most of them have just been dumping through everything. And I would love to find an example. Centers on this layout. I'm not sure if idle's not a good example of that. I mean, this was a fairly clear falling off that trend line. I did look at this, but I think I just looked at it a little bit too late. Gave a nice long entry for anybody brave enough to take it, and is now up in 2-weekly supply. But this could run up for a while. I wanted this to take out those highs, and I think that it obviously did on that, just tiny on a wick. Left some more stops up here, so I'm not sure. Had a decent reaction off that alert, but has been pushed back up again fairly quickly. So it's come down into 4-hour demand. So this is what I was saying when I was saying how you can trade the alert. So you could trade this as being a hit on a 2-weekly supply, watch it a little bit, stop up here, see what happens, knowing it's coming off 3-month demand in this case. Or you can just trade the scalp down to this 4-hour, the next, the first trouble, 4-hour demand down here. In this case, it's had a very nice bounce. And similarly, obviously, you can trade the long back up again. But what the alerts also give you is often the charts that are volatile. So they at least might give trading in different directions. And I know at least one of my group will look at some of my my alerts for possible short entries like this one, and he looks to take longs because he knows there's momentum that's taken this back up into supply. And so this is a good example of something very strong momentum having come back up over three days into supply. So he will sometimes take those for continuation, because there is no reason why you can't take a trade like this, off that 4-hour demand and just try and at least ride it up to a more refined area inside of the bigger. So you've got the big supply and then you've got the refined supply. So maybe this would get a push in here. I think that's a fairly risky way of trading, but for scalpers, there's nothing wrong with doing that. BDX, I think, is another crazy one. Yeah, ran down through 3 different alerts. So some of these are just crazy. And on whether they're tradable, I don't know. Yeah, this is only on the shittier of exchanges. But again, it has 6-month demand. So is that 6 months? In this case, it has bounced off it. So I had a 6-month demand down here, and it's come down 3 months and nearly to the bottom. But it had a 6-month demand here, and it's just run straight through that. So that's why I had all those alerts. But it's run straight through that on a giant swing failure. So now maybe it's just going to run from here. Who knows? I need to see what the close is like. But it's, if it closes with a monthly supply, then it might just die from here. M was another one of the big dumpers. So again, it had, I think, a 2-month demand in there. Yeah, closed above this candle. Excuse me, drawings. So it closed above that candle, making a 2-month demand in here. Maybe a 3. No, it didn't quite make a 3-month demand. And a monthly inside the 2 months. So again, I had a couple of alerts for the possibility of aggressive long off the 2 month or weaker long off the monthly, and it's just pulled a giant. And I think this was on an hourly. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's been what's the word, delisted or something, and then where that came from. But yeah, there was an alert for that 2 monthly at the top. I think the monthly alert didn't go and have a chance to set it, and then it's come all the way back down into this weekly demand at the base, and is looking like it will flip those monthlies into supply. So potentially look for shorts if this closes down in the next 4 days now. 4 days till a half year. Where has this year gone? Crazy. Anyway, what else? What else can we look at? MYX I think isn't particularly interesting. So yeah, MYX again, a nice example. We've got monthly demands in here, a couple of monthly demands, and it's really just drifting. It might still hold, it's still, but it's drifting. It had barely a bounce off the top of the zone. In fact, it didn't really tap it. It didn't quite tap it there. Made a monthly supply, or is going to make a monthly supply in there if it hasn't made it already, and has now just come back down deeper in the zone. But is this just going to go back through here and die forever now? Uncertain. Let's go up to the top of this list. So these are all the June alerts anyway. Let's see how some of these earlier ones did. Yeah, so another example. This is another crazy chart. I think I just updated this yesterday and added a new and aggressive short entry in here. So it's in monthly demand, but obviously it had this gap, I think, where it presumably was delisted for some period of time and then came back again. So that's September 2025 to March 2026. There's a 6-month gap in here. And yeah, again, just something else that just fell off a cliff. It had a weekly demand in here, so I obviously had the alert there. You can see the green cross hiding. And then it's come back down as a monthly demand, but barely got any bounce. Well, actually, no, so it did have a decent bounce off there, but then obviously hasn't had any follow-up. No demand to give you a higher low, and it's now drifting. So we shall see where this ends up. Zig, I haven't looked at for a long time. So one of the other issues we've had is some of these just have taken a long time. So the timing this year has been quite hard on alts, I think. And I've said it a few times on looking at when things are breaking out. So at this point in time, throughout this year, we've had things on major demands like this on a monthly demand, and maybe some yearly supply by the looks of it, but it's on a monthly demand. But then the alert would have gone March 2026, and then it hasn't really started breaking out until May. So whether people have been able to persevere and hold these, and I actually saw somebody in one of my channels that I follow the other day that was claiming, oh, this is a similar chart, very similar chart to this, but saying, oh yes, if you held this, you would have had 200% profit or something like that. First of all, obviously, there's no mention of where the stop loss is in this equation. Secondly, you need some sort of trade management. Yes, you could potentially take this with your stop down here, but then you would have been holding it for 2 months. You would have been paying fees. If you traded on spot, I suppose not. But why would you hold this when crypto is just as liable to do this and then do another drop, particularly if it's looking like that? So yeah, to say that's a successful entry is a bit of a stretch. Yes, the demand held, but 2 months till the breakout. I really didn't give any. It doesn't look like I didn't even come back and test the daily there, so it just went. And the same applies here at the top. A lot of the tops are easier than this. So this top is an example of a more complex one, and one that took more time. So the first alert would have gone for monthly supply, and it did give a reaction. Then would have had an alert inside here for weekly supply inside the monthly. Then we were looking for a retest entry here, which by the looks of it failed. I guess that would have been a 12-hour or 8-hour. Maybe an 8-hour. No, actually, maybe a much lower time frame. On some of these, I would have said that would have been an aggressive entry or something. But then even then, and obviously by now I've forgotten about it. And then by the time it finally comes down on the 16th of June, having had that first alert go on the 21st of May, so 3 weeks later, I've then got bored and forgotten about it. So monthly supply could still play out on this and could still give a significant drop. But for the moment, this is holding its 3-day demand. More interesting one. So this is what you're looking for, if you get them. But they're sort of the ideal entries, I guess. You've got a consolidation here that didn't quite hit demand at that low. So you're looking for the retest to come back into that demand, and this would have been slightly harder because you also had the weekly demand below. But so 2 options there. And similarly, the other benefit on this for taking a long off this would be that it hadn't hit monthly supply at the high. It's obviously in a weekly here, but it hasn't hit the monthly. I quite like that there as a support level. So a nice decent entry on that. But again, is this going to be one of the ones that's either going to be either ready or even going to do this? I don't know. Like, to me, this whole thing is like a massive guessing game. And as we go through these, I guess you'll see some that have and some that have just gone sideways and then died again. So are we in this scenario? Should we be looking for a similar, what happened here? This is going to come up into here and then just eventually do that. Or is it going to be one of the ones that's pounding through supply? And that's just, up to you what you want to do. For me, so I would say on this, but for me, the probability is so low that we're going to go through supply like this because so few of them do it, that I would think you're in much better position if you're trading the short entries on the retests. And if they fail, they fail. And Waves is another one, again, hit a major, so it's hit 2-month demand. It's now come down to 3-week, 2-week demand inside. So something to keep an eye on, but still early days on this as to how long it's going to need time to consolidate or whether it's going to take off immediately. Anybody's guess. And what I do also quite often is I'll look back at previous moves and see how long they took. So this still had this is a 3-day chart, so it's got 5 or 6 candles, so maybe 2 weeks trying to form a low here. Sometimes sometimes they're quick and you do just have to go in and hope for the best. Other times they're significantly slower. On this chart particularly, if it's that much slower, it seems like it doesn't get very far. If it's quicker, it's going far. But what you do get is a retest. So this goes up, it's had the bounce, and then you're looking for the retest on this level. Same here, that would have been the entry, and then it gave you the retest. So even if you don't take that first move, potentially you get in on the retest. So this is a lower time frame retest. But if this holds now and then runs up, and then ideally you wanted to break some supply, then you look for the retest for potentially the bigger move with this macro 2-month demand playing out. This you'd have to look at what supply. I'm looking at the 6-month and yearly supply up here, so Waves is looking fugly. And Waves BTC will also have, but if that's probably at all-time low as well. Yeah. Or at least it is. It's less history on that. Unfortunately, Binance, which had a lot of the BTC pair history, has removed a lot of BTC pairs, and unfortunately with their removal from Binance, they also get removed from TradingView, which is kind of annoying. Useless is pretty useless. So I remember somebody was asking me way back here, where should they buy this? And I think I put, there was a daily demand here, and I put the possibility of there, and I said, but here would be my preferred. What has actually happened is it's just bounced on the 61 fib. And it's still thinking about things. So again, timing on this is not easy either. Let's flip to a 3-day demand in there. Yeah, so on something like this, obviously you can see I had the alert for shorting off supply there, and it's come down and it's hit the weekly demand. So now it might get another push on this up to the next supply. So I wouldn't necessarily be looking at this now for a short re-entry per what I've had here from previously. So if the alert, so that would have been a, excuse me, my eye is being very itchy. So yeah, 12-hour supply there. Really, you want that to hit quickly. You don't want price to come all the way down to a weekly demand and then go up and hit it. Now, it might still work. I could still leave it in there and see what happens. But it's much lower probability than if it had hit on the immediate bounce. But because now it's had consolidation, it's hit a major, much higher time frame demand. This was one of the ones I struggled with. I think for a while I was thinking, should I put an alert in here? But it's back to being similar to that others chart again, or link, or any of them, where they come down and they haven't really hit a zone. Like, so there is the 61 fib there, but it's in the middle of a green candle and balance on this side. Hasn't hit a major level like this or like this. So it makes me more wary of putting in long entries here, because I think at this point this could still just be an A, B, C. So yeah, so I left, and there are other things that are high probability. So if I'm wrong and this bounces here, holds a higher low, then maybe it can have another run. So if you're trading this, you can certainly watch out for that. But for me, there are other things that are higher probability, so it's not worth me putting an alert there. But I only have a finite amount of alerts. Yeah, so my preference would be 70 fib, 70% fib down here. If not lower, I said in the alert, there's not much low time frame, so it could drop inside here, but we'll see what happens if and when we ever get there. Audio, another one that's basically going to zero. Yeah, this is just sort of indicative of a lot of the charts where they're just down and down and down and down and down. Annual supply up there, great if we do get a run through. It could do a fairly epic stop hunt through that whole area. So maybe another trend line on that. Could and probably will do an epic stop hunt at some stage through that area, but when is it going to happen? Who knows? And you're basically guessing again, because we don't have any support over here. So how long this could potentially go down for before it decides to bounce is anyone's guess. And you can see even here, so on a lot of these charts, you'll see where I tried. So in the case of this, it had a pump, and then obviously I'd put an alert on the daily demand. In this case, it's made a whole load of structure. I would have had that alert from way back over here in time. But yeah, decent up move, taken out some supply, great, come back, retest, look for that a higher low and the second up move, but no, straight back through. That's noting that most of these are coming off a higher time frame supply. So in this case, this has come off 3-weekly supply at the high there. So the next step is for it to make a lower low. And you can look for a higher low per exactly what I've done here. But all I'm seeing on these is that they're just running straight through any consolidation that happened at the low. So that was, that's good we came across that, because that's one of the examples I wanted to say, and there are many others, but where the pumps happen, but any of the alerts I've had looking for higher lows have pretty much all failed. White whale, that's another one. It may or may not hold here, who knows. I had an alert for a weekly demand, and now it's got a 5-day inside it, or a 4-day there. So again, if it holds, great, but I don't know what should tell me how it was actually. Yeah, I don't know at what point in time. So I guess we've been in markets before where we can trust alts to just bounce and run. to demand to hold. And but we haven't been able to trust that for quite a long time anyway. And secondly, it needs the hype. So if you're one of those hype hunters, then maybe you can go and look on Twitter or in other social media to see if people are talking about these coins and see whether people, are people really accumulating here? Or is this just a dying coin that's going to end up going to zero? Because it's pretty hard to judge. It's got a long way it can retrace if it wants to from wherever these initial people who bought the ICO or whatever this had back in 2025. Having said that, if this does run, it can run really significantly. But I still feel like it's gambling and guessing as to whether it is. And if that's the kind of trader you want to be, then fine, throw $100 in this or $1,000 or whatever you can afford, and see what happens. And be happy. If it pumps, great. If it doesn't, then it will go to zero, and then that's fine, and accept that loss. But for me, it's gambling, not trading. Trading is when I want to see things like this, and you can see when I'm trading multiple things multiple times to try and get entries and scalps and the bigger moves. So we've got Huma here has hit 2 monthly supply. Yeah, it's a 2 month supply. It's got a monthly inside it. It's hit the 3 week at the high. It's hit the 3 week inside it. It's taking its sweet time and still holding demand. It's taking too long. If it takes this long, then maybe it's going to fail. So by this time, any shorts that you were holding in the hope that price is going to go to zero or make a lower low off monthly supply might be a little more risky. I thought Huma had been around longer, actually. May 2025. Maybe that is I feel like this is an older coin, but I don't know if it got delisted and relisted or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's still consolidating, and it's good that it consolidates under monthly demand from a long perspective. Like now, I wouldn't necessarily be holding these shorts unless I see something new. I'd be a lot more wary of this because it's taken so long. But what it has given is 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth one maybe didn't work. 5 decent entries, but decent scalp shorts. And if it comes back down here, we can look for longs and noting it's coming off 2 month supply. But that's trading. That's when you're looking at zones as they're hit and trying to get entries, as you can see over here. It's quite been a nice one to trade by the looks of it. Safe, another one I think similar to audio, just down. For the moment, broken all-time low again. Could be a swing fail, who knows, or could be a stop hunt and close back inside here, but at the moment it looks like it's going to create monthly supply. CHR, possible double bottom here. I think I looked at this and thought, I wonder if this will make a double bottom a couple of days ago. Wouldn't know. Obviously it's gone lower since then, but again, I was saying it's just too early to tell. I think it just looked quite nice, and at least with this, the double bottom is at a previous support. And it's got a lot of space to supply, so we don't want this to create the 2 monthly supply that I've got drawn in there. That obviously isn't confirmed yet. So while I've also got these early drawings of monthly and 2 monthly supply, I haven't for the most part alerted them, except if they're much further away. So in this case, I've only got an alert on weekly supply in here, and there's a yearly level there as well. So, but again, it might be a double bottom here, but need to see if it can make it through this local supply and past that level. The 2 month level could still also have a reaction even before it's confirmed. So I'm just checking the time. We're up to 50 minutes, so I'm not going to keep going much longer on this. I was hoping, like I say, to get some requests and then I can actually answer some proper questions, but no such luck today. I think a lot of people at the moment are just trading Bitcoin and Ether. So Dash was again another one. Been pretty nice to trade. I've been bullish on this. This has hit 6 month demand. I was thinking that it's going to follow Zcash, etc., but it's just again taking its sweet time doing anything. Not sure what that floating alert is, but obviously it looks like it went through whatever that was supposed to be. It's on a 6 month demand that it's holding, so this could still hold. Few too many hits again, but something that's worth keeping an eye on here. It was holding. Don't love it. It's another one that I would kind of like for it to fall off a cliff first. I like it on the high time frames, but on the lower time frames it's not ideal. Again, one you can look at the BTC pair, which I think does have a decent history. Axel, yeah, there's another example of one that I put an alert in for a higher low. Would have taken probably too long to hit up to the high time frame. And again, the timing of the hit is critical as well. If Bitcoin's just breaking down, then things are going to break the lows. But yeah, as I've said before, these were sort of hit and hope long alerts, and the bias is short, 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 short. If we get a retest, I don't always have all the short alerts in there, but the bias was short, and ever since we broke this low or got the retest, then the bias is short. Long bias up here, for we're looking for retest, and then we go into short bias as we start ranging. But yeah, so the biases on this is still short, but worth looking for a long on the higher low. Chill guy, basically the same. Tiny bounce off that daily demand, but really hasn't gone anywhere. A lot of zones above that haven't been tested while we're still holding support in areas like this. But once it's broken down with nothing to catch it to the left, it's very much guesswork. So yeah, a lot of these alerts that I put in the group, I'm just saying, it's coming, and they'll say something like hitting daily demand, but coming from 3 weekly supply, i.e. the point being it's still very much in a downtrend. Out of date chart. I need to go through some of these at the end of June to update. Yeah, OMT. So this is another example of one that's just going back to zero. Or potentially also on a weekly demand. I don't know. Won't it hold this? Maybe. Who knows? But yeah, I've obviously had an alert probably for the 5-day/weekly here. It's had a tiny little bounce and that's it. I would have had an alert here. 3 weekly. It's 3 weekly supply now. Might have been a 3 weekly. Yeah, so it was just if it flips this 3 weekly level here. I don't know if there was something lower time frame. Yeah, so and also a 12-hour demand in there. But this is basically what we're seeing. We had these pumps March, April, May. They hit supply and then just drift of death ever since. There's no follow-up PA to any of this stuff. Right, in the interests of time, 53 minutes. Lit. This was one I was actually more bullish on. Hit annual demand here. So again, we've got an aggressive entry. So we've got the first hit on annual demand, then you've got an aggressive re-entry probably on an 8 or 12-hour demand there. Gave it a little bit of a bounce, but still didn't break the downtrend. So you're still looking at a downtrend. I can draw that very well, but there's some sideways/downtrend. Some of the waves are cleaner than others, and it was only when you've had test here and then we start to make this triangle that we start to see the reversal. So it took a really long time again, but in this case at least did give that first entry, did give a retest entry, then gave a deeper entry later, and then obviously again I haven't looked at it since then. It's given a 2 weekly demand entry there. I looked at it here obviously and it gave a 2-day entry, so you can try and get the later entries. But this is a pretty nice looking chart actually. Got a lot of scope to go higher, so I think it got, but then I don't know what happened with it. Does anybody remember what happened? Obviously it got delisted and then relisted, but if it didn't, assuming it didn't get, so 21st of May and then 22nd of December, no, 21st of May 2023 this chart ended, and then December 2025 it came back, so there's a 2-year gap in there, but I can't remember what happened to it. Like, did it get delisted? Did it, well obviously it got delisted, but did it get hacked or scammed or something like that, or is it just that it got delisted off purpose? And normally I check these charts on, I check to see which one has the most history. So look at one of the spot charts. So yeah, again, we've still got that gap on this from February 2025 to Jan 2026. So that's actually only a year in there. So this is slightly different to the other lit chart. I'm looking at the same chart, right? 7-9, yes. Yeah, so maybe perps got delisted for longer. I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't even be really looking at this chart. Or maybe they've removed some data actually. Judging by what's happened here, it looks like they've removed some data. Because you can see how neatly all these boxes line up, yet there's nothing there. So if the so the yearly doesn't exist on this chart. So maybe I've had this has possibly been my older chart, and yeah, I've got some older levels on there, but they've removed some data in the interim. Always throws you off a little bit. Anyway, lit's looking pretty nice. So you can keep an eye on that from a long perspective if you really must long. Shorts, if it gets up into there, and yeah, it's looking like it might break out on that actually. Boom, another one hit 3 weekly supply. So did hold test here and now is holding a second test. So that could be of interest. Bonk. In weekly demand down here. Second test after the wick. So I had some of these alerts. So when we had these big wicks, I reset a lot of the alerts that got knocked previously, saying that we might get a retest of the wick. So this would have been a retest in that weekly demand or back on that wick. This is looking a little bit weaker, but has now come down and taken out the wick, I think. Yeah, has just taken out that wick, so it could get a run on this. Again, it's probably got, I'm not looking at the detail on this, but probably got some supply above there, so it's not necessarily something you really want to be looking at. Anyway, all up, you can see sort of from all the alts that I'm running through that we've got so many that just, well, basically all of them, near enough, all of them are in these epic downtrends. Some of them are hitting major demands. Even where they are hitting major demands, they're barely getting any sort of bounce off them, which is like really concerning. And I don't know if I've seen too many, but with so much history as this, but a lot of these are just breaking down and breaking long-term demands and potentially going to zero. So what we're not getting is these types of bounces that we've had previously. So when things are coming back, like this STX in 2023, then it had a decent bounce. What I'm not seeing is the newer stuff is just here and then da-da-da-da-da-da. So, and again, I don't know if that's indicative of just having so many coins in the market now that people have just moved on to the next narrative. But it's very much keeping up with the narratives for these and all scalps. And I haven't even through these. I think maybe at the start of the month we were getting more dumps than pumps, but I haven't covered many of these short entries. We haven't got a huge amount of these short entries. What we are seeing, as you can see here, an alert for long on weekly demand, but it's just died straight through it. Anyway, I'm gonna end this stream now, so we stick within the hour, and what I will try and do is come back in the next week and do another stream once we see what the 1, 2, 3 and 6 month closes are looking like. And as you can see from most of what we've looked at today, 90% of the market's going to be looking pretty hideous with 1, 2 months supplies immediately above and 3, 6 months higher, unless we get some like miraculous recovery in the next 4 days. And we'll get the odd thing like Hype and Zcash that have outperformed that might make 1, 2, 3 or 6 month demands. Whether they'll hold is another matter. So we just have to see those retests, watch this space. Anyway, I hope that is useful. I hope you have a good evening, and I will catch you soon. Bye.